Witchcraft and Superstitious Record in the Southwestern District of Scotland. By J. Maxwell Wood, M.B. Chapter 1. Traditional Witchcraft Described. For she's gathered witch dew in the Kells kirkyard, in the mirk how of the moon, and fed hersel, with the wild witch milk, with a red-hot burning spoon. Mlehen. Preface. Throughout Dumfriesshire and Galloway, remnants of old-world customs still linger, suggesting a remoter time, when superstitious practice and belief held all-important sway in the daily round and task of the people. In gathering together the available material bearing upon such matters, more particularly in the direction of witchcraft, fairy lore, death warnings, funeral ceremony and ghost story, the author trusts that by recording the results of his gleanings much as they have been received, and without at all attempting to subject them to higher analysis or criticism, a truer aspect and reflection of the influence of superstition upon the social life of those older days, may be all the more adequately presented. Chapter 1. Traditional Witchcraft Described. When out the hellish legion sallied. Tam o' Shanter. In the far-off days, when superstition, in close association with the evil sister of ignorance, walked abroad in the land, the southwestern district of Scotland shared very largely in the beliefs and terrors embraced under the general descriptive term of witchcraft. Active interference in the routine of daily life on the part of the Prince of Darkness and his agencies was fully believed in. The midnight ride, the power of conversion into animal semblance and form, mystic rite and incantation, spells and cantrips, as well as the presence on earth of the devil himself, who generally appeared in some alluring form, all had a firmly established place in the superstitious and impressionable minds of the people who dwelt in the land of those darker days. In approaching the whole matter for descriptive purposes, the traditional, or as it may perhaps be fittingly termed, the ideal form of witchcraft, falls naturally first to be considered, and here the existence of a secret society or unholy order of witches and warlocks meeting together at certain appointed times, figures as an outstanding feature, qualification to belong to which, confessed rare powers of affinity with the powers of evil and darkness. The more these witches and warlocks were feared in their ordinary guise as human mortals by the countryside or district to which they belonged, the higher the rank accorded to them in secret conclave, and the special notoriety of having been branded or scored, at the hands of an angry populace, with the sign of the cross on the forehead, carried with it special recognition of itself. Reputed gatherings or witch festivals were celebrated periodically, the most important and outstanding taking place at Hallowmas, and such eerie places of meeting as the lonely ruins of Sweetheart Abbey in Caerlaverock Castle, were the appropriate scenes of their midnight rites and revels. But most of all in this southwestern district was it to the rising slope of Locherbriggs Hill, not many miles from Dumfries, that the hellish legion repaired. There is a remnant extant of an old song called the Witches' Gathering, that with quaint and mystic indication tells of the preliminary signals and signs, announcing that a midnight reunion or Hallowmas raid as it was aptly termed, had been arranged and appointed, when the grey howlet has 3 times hooted, when the grimy cat has 3 times mewed, when the tod has yowled 3 times in the wood, at the red moon cowering behind the cloud, when the stars have cruppen deep in the drift, lest cantrips had piked them out of the lift, up horsiesa, but Meridow, ride for Locherbriggs no. On such a night the very elements themselves seemed in sympathy. The wind rose, gust following gust, in angry and ever-increasing intensity, till it hurled itself in angry blasts that levelled hayrick and grain stack, and tore the thatched roof from homestead and cot, where the frightened dwellers huddled and crept together in terror. Over and with higher note than the blast itself, high-pitched eldritch laughter, fleeting and mocking, skirled and shrieked through the air. Then a lull, with a stillness more terrifying than even the wild force of the angry blast, only to be almost immediately broken with a crash of ear-splitting thunder, and the flash and the glare of forked and jagged flame, lighting up the unhallowed pathway of the witches' ride. The journey itself, or rather the mode of progression in passing to the witch gathering, was itself steeped in diabolery of varying degree. The simple broomstick served the more ordinary witch for a steed. Another vehicle was the chariot of ragwort or ragweed, harnessed to the wind, for sisters of higher rank. Broomsticks specially shod with the bones of murdered men, became high-mettled and most spirited steeds, but the possession of a bridle, the leather of which was made from the skin of an unbaptized infant, and the iron bits forged at the smithy of the evil one himself, gave to its possessor the power of most potent spell. Only let a witch shake this instrument of Satan over any living thing, man or beast, and at once it was transformed into an active witch steed in the form generally of a grey horse. With the full knowledge and resentment that a spell had been wrought, to compass this ignoble use. This was familiarly known and described as being ridden post by a witch. No better picture was ever drawn of the wild witch diabolery in abandon than in Tam O'Shanter, but it may be claimed for Galloway that in the possession of the powerful poem of Maggie O. the Moss, Ayrshire is followed very closely, as the following quotation bearing upon this particular point brings out, but Maggie had that nick to gang, through regions dreary, dark, and lang, to hold her orgies. Then cross his haunches striding o'er, she gave him the command to soar. At first poor Simon, swear to yield, held hard and fast the frosty field, his body now earth's surface spurned, he seemed like gravitation turned, his heels went bickering in the air, he held till he could hold it no more, till first wind it had, sign the tither, he lost his head out altogether, and mounted up in gallant style, right perpendicular for a mile. For brawly kenned she how to ride, and stick ricked close to Simon's hide, for aft had Maggie on a cat. Across the German Ocean sat, and with old Nick and all his kennel, had often crossed the British Channel, and many a nicked with them had gone, to Brussels, Paris, or Toulon, and many a stormy Halloween, had Maggie danced on Calais Green. Like a swarm of bees in full flight they passed, all astride of something, be it ragwort, broomstick, kale runt, hare, cat, or domestic fowl, or even as indicated riding post on a human steed. Assembled at the Dumfriesshire or Galloway Brocken. Tribute to Satan, who presided in person, had to be paid for the privilege of exercising their unholy license over their several districts and neighborhoods. This took the form of unchristened cane bairns, the witches' own by preference, but failing this, the stolen offspring of women of their own particular neighborhood. The rite of baptismal entry, which all novitiates had to undergo, was also a regular part of the weird proceedings of this witches' Sabbath. A magic circle was drawn round the top of the meeting mound, across which none but the initiated and those about to be initiated dare pass. In the center of this circle a fire emitting a thick, dense, sulphurous smoke sprang up, round which the assembled company of witches and warlocks danced with joined hands and wild abandon. Into the charmed circle the converts, naked and terror-stricken, were brought and dragged to the fire, which now sent forth even thicker clouds as if in a measure to screen the secrecy of the rites even from those participating. And scream after scream arose as their naked bodies were stamped with the hellish sign manual of the order. A powerful soothing ointment was, however, immediately poured on the raw wounds, giving instant relief and almost effacement to the ordinary eye, the well-concealed cicatrix becoming the witch mark. The grim nature of the ordeal now gave place to proceedings more in keeping with a festival, and dancing of the better the worse order and general hilarity and high revelry followed. The Prince of Darkness joining in the dance, giving expert exhibitions with favored partners. Next in importance to Satan himself at these Walpurgis night festivals at Locherbriggs Tryst, was the celebrated witch Jair Carline, who possessed a wand of great creative and destructive power. It is told how in the days when Lochar Moss was an open arm of the Solway Firth, an extra-large tide swept up and washed away several of the witch steeds from the Locherbrig Hill. This so enraged the Jair Carline that over the unruly waters she waved her magic wand. And what was once a moss and then a sea became again a moss and I will be. At other meetings of less consequence the more important Carlines of different districts met together, when schemes of persecution and revenge were evolved, and where philters and charms were brewed and concocted for distribution amongst their inferior sisters whose office it was to give them effect. A concoction of virulent power was in the form of a bannock or cake, better known as the witch cake, whose uncanny preparation and potency has been so quaintly described in verse by Alan Cunningham. The witch cake. I saw yestreen, little was ye what I saw yestreen, the black cat piked out the grey ain't seen, at the hip o' the hemlock no yestreen. With her tail in her teeth, she whirled around, with her tail in her teeth, she whirled around, till a bright star dropped free the lift abound, and she kept it ever it went to the ground. She hid them all in her mouth and chewed, she hid them all in her mouth and chewed, she drabbled them over with a black toad's blood. And baked a bannock and cooked it good. She horned it well with a blink o' the moon, she horned it well with a blink o' the moon, and when it shines thrice she whirled it round, there's some Saul skirl before ye be done. Some lass may go with a kilted sark, some priest may preach in a thackless kirk, thread may be spun for a dead man's sark, and may be done ever the song o' the lark. Tell me what ye saw yestreen, tell me what ye saw yestreen, there's een may gour thee sich and green. For telling what ye saw yestreen. At such minor meetings also, effigies were moulded in clay of those who had offended, which pierced with pins conveyed serious bodily injuries and disorder in their victims corresponding to the pin punctures. 2 of these carlines dispensing the black art in the respective parishes of Caerlaverock and New Abbey were in the habit of meeting with each other for such purpose, but the holy men of Sweetheart Abbey overcame their wicked designs by earnest prayers, so much so that their meetings on the solid earth were rendered futile, and thus thwarted, their intercourse had to take place on the water. Of this the following tale from Cromek, as reputed to be told by an eyewitness, is descriptive. The following paragraph is heavily a direct translation of the local dialect used. I gied out a fine summer night to haud my have at the pow fit. It was 12 foot o'clock and all was lone, the moon had just gotten up, ye maught a gathered preens. I heard something fursel like silk, I glowered round and lake. What saw I but a bonny boat, with a knob o' gowd, and sails like new coined siller. It was only but a wee bit tie from me. I maught almost touched it. Good speed ye jiff ye gang for guid. Quoth I, for I dreed our auld carline was casting some o' her pranks. Another cunning boat cam off from Caerlaverock to meet it. There 'twas bade a stricken hour together city for city. Haith, quoth I, the deal's grit with some, saw I crap down among some lang cows till lucky cam back. The boat played bout against the bank, and out lopes Kimmer, with a piked naig's head in her hand. Lord be about us, quoth I, for she came straught for me. She howked up a green turf, covered her bane. And gied her was. When I thought her hame, up I got and poured up the bane and hid it. I was flayed to gie back for TWA or 3 nights, lest the deal's Minnie should wipe me for her uncanny boat and lair me amang the sludge, or maybe do war. I gied back howsever, and on that night the moon wa comes to me but Kimmer. Rabin, quo she, fand ye our auld bane amang the cows? Deed no, it may be gowd for me, quoth I. Well, well, quoth she, I'll bide and help ye hame with your fish. Gods be me help, not grip pit I but tades and paddocks. Satan, thy neve's here, quoth I, can ye, quoth I, yon new cheese our wife took but from the Chessel yestreen? I'm going to send it to ye in the morning, ye're a good neighbor to me, and hearest thou me? There's a bit old bane hummeled underneath their cows, I can't know it was thine. Kimmer drew it out. Aye, it's my old bane, well speed ye. Aye, the very first pow I got sick a lutha o' fish that I carried, till me back cracked again. A celebrated witch connected with Wigtownshire was Maggie Osborne. On the wild moorland between the marches of Carrick and the valley of the Loose tracks are pointed out, on which the heather will not grow, as Maggie's gate to Gallowa, the sod having been so deeply burned by her tread, or that of her weird companion. Among the misdemeanors imputed to her, in aggravation of the charge for which she was cruelly condemned, was that of having impiously partaken of the communion at the Moor Kirk of Luce. She accepted the bread at the minister's hands, but a sharp-eyed office-bearer, long after, swore that he had detected her spitting out the wafer at the church door, which he clearly saw swallowed by the devil, who had waited for her outside in the shape of a toad. Again it was asserted that when passing from Bar to Glenluce by the Nick o' the Balloch she encountered a funeral procession, and to pass unseen she changed herself into a beetle. But before she could creep out of the way, a shepherd in the party unwittingly set his foot upon her, and would have crushed her outright had not a rut partly protected her. Much frightened and hurt she vowed vengeance, but the moorman being a pious man, for long her arts were of no avail against him. One night however, detained late by a storm, he sat down hurriedly to supper, having forgotten to say grace. Her incantations then had power. A wreath of snow was collected and hurled from the hill above on the devoted cabin, and the shepherd, his wife, and family of 10 were smothered in the avalanche. In Glenluce a story is handed down which brings out that it was not necessarily the dweller in the humble cot on whom the mantle of witchcraft fell, but that the high-bred dames of the hall did also at times dabble in the practice. A laboring man's wife, a sensible, decent woman, having been detained late from home, was returning about the witching hour. And at a spot known as the Clay Slap she met face to face a troop of females, as to whose leader, being cloven-footed, she could not be mistaken. Her consternation was the greater, as one by one she recognized them all, and among them the ladies of the manor. They stopped her, and in her terror she appealed to one of them by name. Enraged at being known, the party declared that she must die. She pleaded for mercy, and they agreed to spare her life on her taking an awful oath that she would never reveal the names of any as long as they lived. Fear prevented her from breaking her pledge, but as one by one the dames paid the debt of nature, she would mysteriously exclaim, "There's neither of the gang gone." She outlived them all, and then divulged the secret, adding that on that dreadful night, after getting to her bed, she lay entranced in an agony as if she had been roasting between 2 fires. The name of Michael Scott of Balweary, Fife, scholar and alchemist, who lived in the 13th century, is traditionally associated with the Abbey of Glenluce. Regarded by the peasantry as a warlock, he was supposed to be here buried with his magic books, and there is a story extant to the effect that a man in the district who daringly disinterred his skeleton, found it in a sitting position confronting him, and that the sight drove him stark mad. Whilst in the neighborhood of Glenluce, Michael the Warlock is credited with having exercised strong discipline over the witches of the district. One task he assigned them to keep them from more doubtful work, was to spin ropes from sea sand, and it is yet said that some of the rope fragments may be seen to this day near Ringdew Point, near the mouth of the Luce, when laid bare by wind and tide. Another equally profitless and endless task set for the same purpose of keeping them from unsanctioned mischievous deeds, was the threshing of barley chaff. There is a quaint reference in MacTaggart's Gallividian Encyclopedia to the library of Michael Scott. He says, "One of these vaults, at the Auld Abbey of Glenluce contains the famous library of Michael Scott, the Warlock. Here are thousands of old witch songs and incantations, books of the black art, and necromancy, philosophy of the devil, Satan's almanacs, the fire spangs of Faustus, the soothsayer's creed, the witch chronicle, and the black clud's wime laid open, with many more valuable volumes." It may be noted in passing that the Abbey of Holmcultram, in Cumberland, has also been associated as the burial place of the wizard Michael, but it is with Melrose Abbey, as depicted by Sir Walter Scott in the Lay of the Last Minstrel, that the most cherished associations linger, even if only in the romance of poetry. With beating heart to the task he went, his sinewy frame o'er the gravestone bent. With bar of iron heaved amain, till the toil drops fell from his brows like rain. It was by dint of passing strength, that he moved the massive stone at length. Before their eyes the wizard lay, as if he had not been dead a day. The religious house of Tongland may be said to have some slight connection here, for in Dunbar's poem of the Dream of the Abbot of Tongland, the Frenziate Friar, there is reference to a witch, Janet the Widow, on Ain Besom Rydend. Bess o' Borg and Glencairn Kate were 2 notorious South Country witches. They are included in the descriptive witch poem of Maggie o' the Moss, already referred to. About the middle of the 18th century there was a famous witch that lived at Honeston, in the Kells, who was credited with wonderful powers, and many stories of her exploits are still current. Some say her name was Nicholas Greer, others that it was Gersim Clegg, but it matters little which now. Some of Lucky's favorite pastimes were drowning anyone she had espied at by sinking a cop in the yillboat in her kitchen, sucking cows in the shape of a hare, frightening people at night by appearing to them like a little naked boy, walking in the resemblance of a cat on its hind legs, conversing with travelers on the road, and sending young people into declines. The old church of Dalry has a legend of witch festival surrounding it, which gives it a distinction something akin to the better-known tradition of Alloway Kirk. The following version is taken from Harper's Rambles. Adam Forrester, proprietor of Knocksheen, had been detained one evening until near midnight in the public house at Dalry. On the way home he had to pass the church, and being perhaps like the famous Tam O'Shanter, through indulging in inspiring bold John Barleycorn, ready to defy all dangers in the shape of goblin and spirit, he very soon had his mettle tested. On reaching the church the windows seemed in a blaze, and from within loud bursts of mirth and revelry reached the ears of the astonished laird. Nothing daunted however, he dismounted, and securing his horse to a tree near the churchyard wall, he peered in at the window, and to his astonishment, amongst those engaged in the dance o' witches were several old women of his acquaintance, amongst whom was the landlady of the public house where he had spent the greater part of the evening, and which he had just left. Horrified with such desecration of the sacred edifice, and unable longer to restrain his displeasure, Forrester shouted, "Ho! Ho! Lucky, ye'll no deny this the morn," knocking at the same instant against the window frame with his whip. In a moment the lights were extinguished, and the witches with loud yells rushed out of the church after him, but the laird, having gained his horse, went off at a furious gallop for the ford on the Ken, his pursuers following hard upon him, their frantic and hideous shouts striking terror to his heart. As they could not cross the running stream, they flew to the brig o' Ken, 6 miles distant, where they crossed and overtook Adam on Waterside Hill, tearing all the hair out of the horse's tail, and Lucky getting her black hand on the horse's hip. She left its impression there for life. The laird, finding he could proceed no further, dismounted and was only saved from being torn to pieces by describing a circle in God's name round himself and horse. This charm proved effectual. The fury of the mysterious band was arrested, and at daybreak he rode home to his residence. The story is still current in the Glenkens, and what is supposed to be the circle drawn by the laird is pointed out on Waterside Hill. In concluding the account of traditional witchcraft, there yet fails to be mentioned one outstanding form in which beautiful and seductive female shapes were assumed to tempt through the flesh, the destruction of soul and body. There is no better reference to this than in the local traditional tale of the Laird of Logan of Allan Cunningham, where the struggle between the powers of darkness and those of good contend, not without a certain dignity of purpose, for the mastery. The following is the dramatic document. He took a sword from the wall, and described a circle, in the center of which he stood himself. Over the line drawn with an instrument on which the name of God is written, not unholy can pass. Master, stand beside me, and bear ye the sword. He next filled a cup with water, and said, emblem of purity, and resembling God, for he is pure, as not unholy can pass over thee whilst thou runnest in thy native fountain, neither can aught unholy abide thy touch, thus consecrated, as thou art the emblem of God, go and do his good work. Amen. So saying he turned suddenly round and dashed the cupful of water in the face and bosom of the young lady, fell on his knees and bowed his head in prayer. She uttered scream upon scream, her complexion changed, her long locks twined and writhed like serpents, the flesh seemed to shrivel on her body, and the light shone in her eyes which the master trembled to look upon. She tried to pass the circle towards him but could not. A burning flame seemed to encompass and consume her, and as she dissolved away he heard a voice saying, but for that subtle priest, thou hadst supped with me in hell. Thus concludes Chapter 1 of Witchcraft and Superstitious Record in the Southwestern District of Scotland. By J. Maxwell Wood, M.B. Feel free to listen to the next chapter, or check out any of the audiobooks in the Weird Audiobooks YouTube library.